Joining me now from Orem, Utah is NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson. Also with me is NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba and NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Reilly. So Steve, first to you, you're there in Utah. What have we learned over the last 24 hours about the suspect in this shooting?
Quite a bit, Yamiche, and primarily from the statements of public and private officials, namely Governor Spencer Cox, who spoke out over the weekend, and Kash Patel, the FBI director, who spoke out this morning. I want to show you something, though, first. First of all, they've opened campus up a little bit, right? This is the amphitheater where Kirk was shot down there. You may hear this horrible noise in a few seconds. That's the saw. They're tearing up some of the grass that was there, and then there it is. And then laying in the concrete to try to change how this looked, of course, after that tragedy just a few days ago. But we want to talk about the investigation. We know, obviously, investigators are trying to put together a profile, right? To that end, Governor Cox speaking over the weekend, telling NBC News, telling the nation, really, that essentially the suspected shooter, Robinson, is not cooperating. Huge, likely bottleneck in the investigation because he's not talking to investigators and he's not cooperating with the investigation. That is a counter to, again, what you mentioned, what we heard about the roommate. The roommate, the governor says, appears to be in a romantic relationship with Robinson, but has been cooperating with investigators, is talking to investigators, wants to help the investigation, according to the governor. And somebody that apparently had no idea about the shooting was shocked to learn, A, that the shooting took place, and B, that Robinson was the suspected shooter. The governor is speaking a little bit more about Robinson, saying that just a few years ago, this was somebody that was considered a normal kid, a college student, somebody that was intelligent and emotionally kind, but was falling deeper and deeper into this hole of politics. And the catalyst for that, he's saying, was the internet culture, that this was somebody that was terminally online, steeped in internet meme culture. It's something that the governor described as a darkness. Many more details coming out. We're going to learn a whole lot more, of course, tomorrow when those formal charges are filed and we get the first court appearance.
And Steve, as you're saying and talking about all the evidence and sort of information that authorities are getting from those who knew Robinson and know Robinson, what other evidence have investigators gathered? We're hearing about DNA.
Yeah, so first of all, let's talk about the DNA, right? I mean, that would have been collected because we're in this atrium, right? The shooter's position likely beyond these buildings. You may not be able to see it from this vantage point. They found and discovered a screwdriver. The DNA that they found on the screwdriver matched DNA that they found on a towel. What's the towel? The towel was used to wrap that weapon, the bolt-action high-powered rifle that was found in the woods very nearby to where I'm standing after he hopped off of the roof and then ran through a neighborhood. They say those two pieces of evidence matched the DNA, a DNA match, according to Patel. Very important, very key part of unlocking, this investigation. The other piece of this, of course, I mentioned, is the digital footprint, right? What are the text messages? What do the message boards look like? What are some of these gaming communities that we're hearing from investigators that he was a part of? To that end, Patel mentioned a series of text messages which seemed to indicate that he wanted to plan something certainly around Kirk being here. And we know through discussions, investigators say, between Robinson and his family, that he knew Kirk was coming and that he had definitely some misgivings about Kirk's message and who he was. So all of that sort of part of the evidence gathered. Again, we should learn a whole lot more tomorrow with those formal charges.
Yeah, we'll definitely be looking to see what else we learn tomorrow. And thanks so much for taking us on this scene as, of course, the university is trying to move on and change the way it looks. It's really fascinating. So thanks so much, Steve. And Monica, you're nearby the White House. President Trump said he hopes the nation will heal following the assassination of Charlie Kirk, but he's also repeatedly blaming the radical left. So what's the White House's thinking here?
Yeah, and the president had said, Yamiche, that this was going to be something that they were going to have more details on, and we're still waiting for those. But we got really extensive comments from the vice president, from the president's deputy chief of staff, from the chief of staff herself, and many others who appeared on the Charlie Kirk podcast that was hosted from the White House today, from the office of the vice president. Since he was such a close friend of Charlie Kirk, he said he wanted to be able to host these remembrances and reflections. But in addition to that, and paying tribute to Charlie Kirk's life, they laid out a little bit of a roadmap as to what could come next. And it was the president who said he wanted to go after these specific, in his words, left-wing organizations that, again, in the words and the view of the White House, fomented some of this, perhaps inspired. Again, that is their position on that, as we still wait to learn a lot more about what led to this horrendous shooting. But this is a situation where the White House is trying to put an action plan out there and saying that they're going to tackle it and that they are going to have more announcements on that, though we're still waiting for more specifics. Yamiche.
Well, Monica, as you said, the White House is putting together this action plan. What more do we know about that action plan? Do we know what groups they have top of mind?
It sounds like Stephen Miller, again, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, is somebody who is going to be leading on this. But we did hear a little bit more from the Vice President and from that conversation as to what we might see. Listen.
We are going to channel all of the anger that we have over the organized campaign that led to this assassination to uproot and dismantle these terrorist networks. The organized riots, the organized street violence, the organized campaigns of dehumanization, vilification, posting people's addresses, combining that with messaging that's designed to trigger and incite violence, and the actual organized cells that carry out and facilitate the violence. It is a vast domestic terror movement. And with God as my witness, we are going to use every resource we have at the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and throughout this government to identify, disrupt, dismantle, and destroy these networks and make America safe again for the American people.
Now, Stephen Miller, in those comments, also said that one of the last messages that he exchanged with Charlie Kirk was actually on this topic. And so he is saying that he is going to take that as a direct motivation to implement this. But again, we're still waiting for the details, though you did see the agencies that Stephen Miller referred to there. And it sounds like there will be more to come from the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security on that.
Certainly strong words from Stephen Miller there. Thank you so much, Monica, from nearby the White House. And Ryan, I want to come to you. The FBI director, he's been giving out a lot of information in real time. Of course, at one point he said the suspect for the shooting was in custody. Then he said he wasn't, and he had been released. Now he was this morning talking about DNA evidence being found. How unusual is it for the FBI director to be given this much information?
Very unusual. This is a social media first, sort of post first way that he's going about this job. Very huge departure from normal bureau protocols. And normally, you don't really necessarily need to have the FBI director on the scene. And there's a ton of complications that having Kash Patel involved in this investigation brings about. Not only now that he sort of walked the scene, could he potentially be called as an expert, broke the news about the DNA, that sort of thing is sort of all layups that you're giving to the defense team down the line. But also, there's not necessarily a federal nexus here. I just talked to actually the foremost expert from DOJ on domestic terrorism. This was an act of domestic terrorism, and we should be clear about that. But it probably won't be charged on the federal level because there is no just domestic terrorism law that can be charged. And so finding the federal hook here is going to be very tricky. And so ultimately, state authorities may be moving forward, and the FBI won't be taking so much of a leadership role in this case.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, you had a great story out over the weekend about all the criticism that Kash Patel is getting. Tell me about that criticism and how is he defending himself?
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to push back on it, and I think trying to own a lot of these sort of basic steps that have gone through. But there's just a lot of tension within the Bureau. Remember, a lot of people who had the most expertise in domestic terrorism because they dealt with an act of domestic terrorism across the street at the Capitol just a few years ago have been pushed out of the Bureau. There's still this nervousness, this pressure that a lot of people within the Bureau are feeling, and especially when you see these explicitly political firings that have been coming from Kash Patel himself, that sends a real chilling effect throughout the Bureau. So, the Bureau just isn't operating at its best capacity right now. It just doesn't have the personnel in place to handle a really tense moment like this. I've been speaking for months with people who have been worried about when the pressure actually comes, how is the FBI going to handle it if there was some massive attack? And I think we're seeing some real cracks right here through this process in the wake of Charlie Kirk's killing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as I talk to White House officials, they continue to say the president has confidence in Kash Patel, but really interesting to see whether or not that shifts at all. So thanks so much, Ryan.
Definitely.
And now joining me is an expert on political violence, Robert Pape. professor of political science at the University of Chicago. Thank you so much for being here. So you're exactly the person that we want to talk to you in this moment. Authorities still have not provided an alleged motive for the shooting. But when we talk about the assassination of Charlie Kirk as part of this larger trend of political violence, what stood out for you, especially from the reaction and the impact of this shooting over the last few days?
Well, the first thing to say about the motive is we don't have the detailed motive on why the shooter attacked Charlie Kirk. However, we have a pretty good macro picture. You'll recall the governor of Utah, others talk about he came from a liberal ideology, the word fascist on the casing. So we really can expect there's going to be more and more information that he had a what we would call a liberal ideology. That said, that's very different than saying there's this vast network of groups and organizations that are fomenting terrorism the way you might think of ISIS. Now, I've studied political violence for 30 years. I'm one of the world's experts on ISIS. I'm one of the world's experts on Al-Qaeda. So when we hear the language disrupt, dismantle, what we usually are focusing on are the organizations or the sanctuary areas of a terrorist group. So that is what you just heard in this. And this is very different than saying, well, the shooter had a liberal ideology or was driven by political violence from the left. This is a different level and will naturally produce a tremendous amount of fear in the 75 to 80 million Democrats in the country.
I want to play for you, if I can, it's what the vice president said today while hosting Charlie Kirk's podcast. Take a listen.
But the data is clear. People on the left are much likelier to defend and celebrate political violence. This is not a both sides problem. If both sides have a problem, one side has a much bigger and malignant problem, and that is the truth we must be told.
So is he right there? Does the data support the idea that there's this sort of single problem on one ideology?
No, and I'm sorry to just get into the facts here, but let's just go since 2022 in the United States. What you are seeing is rising political violence against both the right and the left, coming from both the right and the left. So 2022, we see the assassination plot against conservative Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. We also see the assassination attempt against Democratic Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Missed her, almost killed her husband. Yes, a year ago, we saw 2 assassination attempts against Republican candidate for president Donald Trump. In April of this year, we saw an assassination attempt against the Democratic governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, came within minutes of burning him and his family to death. And then in June of this year, we saw multiple assassinations and other assassination attempts against Democratic political leaders in the state of Minnesota. And now, of course, we have seen the assassination death of Charlie Kirk, one of the leading political figures in MAGA. That is a picture, as you can see, of rising political violence on both the right and the left. I call this era the era of violent populism. And what marks this era is actually how political violence is rising on both sides of the political spectrum, almost at exactly the same time. Now, of course, if you're part of the community that's just been hit, you will feel very intensely that that's coming to you. Just as in June, it was the Democrats who were saying that it's just all coming from the conservatives. And I was on the media saying, no, it wasn't. It was more balanced. The truth is it's more balanced, but we have wounded communities now on both the right and the left.
And basically you're saying it's on both sides. Professor, which is really an important point in this moment. So I want to say thank you so much for bringing your expertise. Absolutely. It's so great to have you in a moment like this.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.